the Jesus way.
Oh, the Jesus way
Is the way of peace.
is the way of peace.
Oh, the Jesus way.
Oh, the Jesus way
Is the way of peace.
is the way of peace.
Oh, the Jesus way is the way of peace. When he is king, all wars will cease. May his peace begin with me.
On December 11th, 2012, a young 22-year-old man walked into the Clackamas Town Center in Portland, Oregon, and started firing a gun. About 10,000 people were in the mall at the time. Miraculously, even though about 60 rounds were fired, killing 2 people and wounding a third before the shooter killed himself, many of the shoppers felt they were protected by God. More tragic and shocking, 3 days later, a 20-year-old man killed his own mother and then walked into a school in Newton, Connecticut, killing 6 adults and 20 children before killing himself. We have no way to explain how these things happen, and we will never know why, because the shooters are dead. The American people have come together in a national outpouring of grief and sympathy for the families of the 20 school shooting victims slain in the mass shooting in Newton, Connecticut. In response to this recent tragedy, the Church of the Brethren has been collaborating with a coalition of over 40 religious groups known as Face United to Prevent Gun Violence. Hello, I'm Brent Carlson. Welcome to Brethren Voices. Face United to Prevent Gun Violence is an alliance of religious groups that bases its work in the belief that gun violence is taking an unacceptable toll on our society, in mass killings, and in the constant day-to-day senseless deaths by firearms all over our country. For the Brethren, who have a long history of advocating for peace, this is basically a slam dunk. In a letter to President Obama, Church of the Brethren General Secretary Stanley Noffsinger, together with officials of 40 other religious groups, including the National Council of Churches, advocated for immediate legislation requiring background checks. Quote, every person who buys a gun should pass a criminal background check, preventing dangerous people from getting firearms. Anyone wishing to purchase a firearm, including those sold online at gun shows or through private sales, should be required to get a background check. The recommendation stated that, quote, high-capacity weapons and ammunition magazines should not be available to civilians. It stated, quote, there is no legitimate self-defense or sporting purpose for these military-style high-capacity weapons and magazines. They are, however, the weapons of choice for those who want to shoot and kill a large number of people quickly. It also advocated that, quote, gun trafficking should be made a federal offense. Currently, prosecutions only happen through a law that prohibits selling of guns without a federal license, which carries the same punishment as trafficking chickens or livestock. Today, we have 5 individuals who are willing to share their thoughts about this subject. Kirby Lauderdale of the Portland, Oregon Peace Church of the Brethren. Kirby will share his thoughts about guns and violence. Here also with us is Doug Eller, a person who appreciates hunting and who has been around guns all of his life. We're also fortunate to have in the studio 3 volunteers from Brethren Volunteer Service. Amanda Glover from the state of Virginia, which I believe is the home of the NRA. Also with us is Rebecca Aldelberger and Jon Hunziger, who come to us from the country of Germany. We'll find out their impressions when it comes to the subject of gun and violence. Our first guest is Kirby Lauderdale, who recently shared his thoughts about the subject in a Sunday sermon. Kirby, it's great to have you with us on Brethren Voices.
Thank you, Brent. Perhaps the wisest book of the Bible is Job, raising and struggling to answer the why of human suffering. The conundrum posed by this Old Testament myth, a true myth, is perhaps the question, why do bad things happen to good people? The answer, we don't know. Or is it God's will? It is part of the mystery that is life. I think the focus of the question is not so much the natural pains of life itself, the pain of childbirth, the pain of accidental injury, the pain of a broken marriage or growing old. And though some of these pains are at issue in the story of Job, the conversation between Yahweh and the accuser, commonly called Satan, or more accurately, the Satan, involves the pains of misfortune. Yahweh said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" The Satan answered Yahweh, "From going to and fro on the earth." But in the story of Job, this observation becomes a bewildering game. Yahweh said to the Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil." The Satan answered Yahweh, "Yes, but does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a fence, protection around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand now and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face." So Yahweh said to Satan, "Very well then, all that he has is in your power." Now, let's see how that turns out. This exchange is a clear giveaway that the story is a mythical story. It is a story that considers a most human, a most profound human dilemma. Is life fair? When we do good, does life reward us with good things? And if life treats us badly, will we behave badly? If we have the good things of life, is that because we are good people? Have we earned good things? And what if we lose our good things? Will we then curse life? Or did we lose them because we've done bad things? And what of the wretched poor? Do they deserve their lot? What follows this conversation between Satan and God in Job is 37 chapters of agonizing misery as Job suffers one miserable event after another and endless serious losses. His health tanks, his children die, his investments collapse, and Job's friends argue endlessly that he somehow is responsible. He needs to confess, even if he is unsure of what to confess. They argue with him. He must have done something to so offend God that God would take everything away. Ultimately, Job recognizes his blessing and his misfortune as wonder and mystery. He realizes this not through arguments of his moralistic and frightened friends, but because Yahweh questions Job with this wisdom. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstones when the morning stars sang together and all the heavenly beings shouted for joy? Have you commanded the morning since your days began? Have you entered into the springs of the sea or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have you comprehended the expanses of the earth? Declare if you know all this. What can any of us say in response? One of the most important considerations for us, I believe, in all of this is more than why bad things happen to good people. Rather, it seems to me equally important to ask, how can we make sense of senseless acts of human violence? Why do we humans add so much misery to human existence? Why do we enslave one another? Why do we steal from one another, rape one another, torture one another? Why do we keep so many people in poverty? Why do we create racial hierarchy? Why do we add seemingly unnecessary pains to human life when we all have enough naturally occurring pains simply being of flesh and blood? Why do we allow weapons of war, assault rifles, to be sold to private citizens? 30,000 deaths per year in the United States by guns. By 2015, gun deaths will exceed U.S. traffic deaths. We cannot own an automobile without a license, but we can own an assault rifle. For a DUI, you will lose your driver's license. You won't even be asked if you own a gun. Why do bad things happen to good people? Actually, I don't think that would be a serious question for us if it weren't for the hell we create for each other by the way we treat each other on this planet. Just weeks ago, 20 kindergartners were murdered in their classroom by a crazy man with an assault rifle in Newton, Connecticut. And we cannot have a national conversation about the lack of wisdom of citizens of any country stockpiling assault rifles and ammo clips in their bedroom closets. The National Rifle Association responds, the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun with an assault rifle is a good guy with an assault rifle. This human problem is far too complex and far too deadly to be answered by dividing us into good guys and bad guys. From a biblical point of view, no human is good enough to kill a bad human. Paul says, no one is good, no, not one. And vengeance is mine, says the Lord. And from the biblical point of view, none of us should have any guns but for hunting. May God be merciful to us all as we painfully struggle to be faithful disciples of Jesus of Nazareth, the Christ.
I'm going to ask Doug Eller, a Christian, a member of the Church of the Brethren, an avid hunter, what he thinks about gun control, guns, and violence.
That's a really big question. The first thing I would say, to me, hunting, I want to explain that a little bit because I do use a rifle when I hunt. And a rifle is meant to kill something. In our society, we are pretty withdrawn. We're far away from how we get food. And to me, my yearly hunting expedition is something that brings me back to nature, that brings me back to a point where I remember that things have to die for me to live. And so the hunting I do is done with respect, with prayers, with sensitivity. It is not a pleasant thing to do, but it's where our food comes from. And to be disconnected from the fact that you can go pick up a hamburger and never have to see a cow die is really something that a lot of people in society don't connect to. And so in my hunting, if I am right with the spirit of the animals, they will come to me and sacrifice themselves to me. And I'm very respectful of that when you take a life. But when you go and then up at where you're using weapons to kill people, that's a whole different kind of ideology. And when I think of it, I think a lot about being a child and watching television. And what did I learn? Well, I learned about Davy Crockett. I learned about cowboys and Indians. And I learned that how you solve problems is you kill each other. And the good guys and the bad guys. And you talk about stereotyping. The good guys had the white hats and the bad guys had the black hats. So we come from a culture that has ingrained a lot about how we feel about dealing with conflict. And I certainly want to use a rifle when I hunt because I want the animal to die quickly. I don't want suffering. I want to be minimal when it comes to the animal. And how I feel about registration of guns, what kind of guns you need. I mean, I've never met anybody who hunts with an assault rifle. There probably wouldn't be very much venison left if you did that. I see no need for the buildup of arms that we have. I have no problem with registration. I don't fear that somebody's going to come take my guns from me, and I can't take them with me when I die anyway, so you can't have things forever. So I guess that hits some of the high points of what I think. I do wonder why it's not a question mark in somebody's mind when somebody buys 6,000 rounds of ammunition, and why the police department wouldn't know about that or want to know about that. It puzzles me. It also puzzles me how we live in such fear. I have a lot of friends, and several of them have concealed weapon permits, and seem to be awful fearful about going anywhere. And I don't know. I can't relate to that fear and wanting to protect yourself and those kinds of things. So.
Well, I appreciate that you're talking about hunting helps you appreciate life and understand this process of birth and death and life that's all connected. And it also suggests something that I think is probably hard to imagine, that you could be hunting and an animal would present itself to you. I think that only a hunter with a spiritual connection would perhaps recognize and appreciate that. Amanda Glover is from Virginia and grew up in a society in a culture that has guns, and quite comfortably so. So Amanda, what do you remember about your childhood and the relationships of guns in the community?
Well, for me personally, my parents were Brethren, Church of the Brethren, and so we weren't even allowed to play with toy guns. So in my house, we didn't have guns, but a lot of people that I knew hunted. In fact, in high school, people even got days off, excused absences to go hunting. And it was very common to see people hunting deer all over the place.
Would these be students in high school?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And in 7th grade, we all got our hunting licenses. We went through a hunter safety course.
So that everybody took the class?
It was required. But I never saw anyone with, unless they were concealed, which I guess they could have been, but I never saw people walking around with handguns.
So as a Christian woman who's appreciates the life of Christ and nonviolence, what's your sense of guns in our society today?
I think that in a utopian future, no one would have a gun. The concern that I have is the hypocrisy of our government and our country telling citizens and civilians that they're not allowed to have weapons or guns when we spend, as a country, we spend all this money on all sorts of weapons that can kill people remotely, immediately, children, citizens, anyone. Our government can just choose to kill them. Murderers, our government has the right to kill them. And it's telling us that we're not allowed to kill other people. I'm concerned that that's hypocritical.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying the government owns all the weapons, all these huge arsenal of weapons, more than any other country in the world.
Right.
And yet doesn't want its own people to have guns to protect themselves. And that's hypocritical.
I think that the problem is that our culture is too focused on, I guess, materialism instead of relationships. And if we try to be more like the Bonobos and work on our relationships with each other, and maybe that would cut down on the paranoia and the isolationism that causes these shootings.
It's interesting you say the bonobos, because I just heard about that species in the last month. I've never heard about them before. And they're actually an ape-like creature that solves this problem through relationships.
Yeah.
And they don't fight with each other.
They just have sex.
I didn't know that.
No, you do.
Our other Brethren volunteers are from the country of Germany, and Germany has very strict gun control rules. You can't just walk in and buy a gun. You have to have a reason, and you have to take hunter safety classes, and unless you're part of the police and the authorities, like security forces, and have a need to own a gun, it's very difficult to have a gun, and you're not permitted to have the gun in your own home. You have to belong to a sports club, and the guns are supposed to be left at the sports club. Jan, I want to ask you about growing up in Germany and your experience with guns in your culture.
Okay. I think compared to like the culture I come from has really difficult relationship with guns in terms of that most of them really don't like them and are afraid of them actually. So if we think about guns in Germany, we don't think really of owning guns, of having guns. Guns are mostly, if we think of guns, we think more of war or probably police, mostly the military. And so it is kind of a far thing. I would say they are not really close to people.
Have you ever had a gun?
Not a real one.
Have you ever shot a gun?
No.
And no one in your family owns a gun?
I have an uncle who works with the police, and I'm pretty sure he has one, although I've never really
seen it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, so young people in your country are not shooting people, and they're not getting guns and going to malls?
Well, I mean, there have been shootings, and of course bad stuff like that happens also in Germany, but the reaction to such things is quite different. Like, society reacts differently. When we had a shooting in a school, I don't know, 6 years ago or so, the most reaction was, how can we keep away or prevent a young person who is obviously crazy to get a gun? And what was the cause? And they figured it out, and they actually made new laws to prevent such things. So they made it harder to get guns.
In that shooting, where did the young man get the gun?
I believe that it was his father's gun, and it was not locked away properly.
Is German society a safer place than the United States?
I don't have... In terms of gun shooting, I would say yes, although I don't have numbers.
But there are not 30,000 deaths a year by shooting.
Well, first of all, there are less people in general, but if you compare, I think we would have less gunshot people.
Per capita?
Yes.
So you don't read about killing in your cities all the time?
No.
Okay.
I think people don't really, where I'm from, don't really have the feeling that they have to protect themselves. Especially for guns, I don't think people go out thinking I might get shot, or there's someone who might try to kill me with a gun. So that never occurred to me.
Before?
No.
Okay. Rebecca, you grew up in Verbad, Germany. Tell us about guns in your life. Have you ever had a gun, or how does your family feel about guns?
Yeah, so I was never in contact with guns at all. I never had a gun. I never shot a gun. Actually, I also didn't really see someone with a gun. So it doesn't appear in my life in the past. And my family is also saying, like, is anti-guns and gun owning. So what I learned when I grew up is, like, when there are guns, people got shot, and because I think there are more people who get killed who were carrying a gun than people who didn't carry a gun. So I think guns lead to violence and lead to murdering more than protecting people.
Did you feel safe when you were walking in your hometown?
I did, yes.
So the lack of guns didn't make things unsafe. You felt safe and protected in the community.
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, as a young woman, walking around in a big city at night can be dangerous, but I never thought about the danger of someone with a gun.
I've often wondered how much of a Christian nation the United States is, because we have this idea that we have the right to bear arms, we have the right to have our guns, and we have the right to protect ourselves. But in the message of this Jesus from Nazareth, he didn't make an effort to protect himself when his life was threatened. And he didn't make an effort to defend himself and fight with other people. And that's really what we're called to do. And yet as Christians in America, I don't think it's something we really think too much about living that way, really.
I think it's significant that the historic peace churches of the United States are the smallest denominations, and which suggests that teaching of Jesus, in a bumper sticker phrase, when Jesus said, "Love your enemies," he probably meant don't kill them. That doesn't capture a lot of people's feeling of the essence of Christianity.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to thank you all for being here today. I think the question of the right to bear arms and how we live as Christians in America are challenging to all of us. And I think it's particularly interesting to have you as guests from Germany and sharing your thoughts in a world where guns access is, we think it's our God-given right to have guns, and you grew up in a society where it's not your right and you don't have them, and you experience maybe a safer society as a result. Today's program on guns and violence in the wake of the mass shootings at Newton, Connecticut, has been our way of saying we're concerned, we don't have the answers, but it's a challenge to live a Christian life in America. For Brethren Voices, this is Brent Carlson, wishing you peace.
All those who tread the path he trod, all those who tread the path he trod, all those who tread the path he trod shall be called the friends of God. May his peace begin with me. Oh, the Jesus way is the way of peace. Oh, the Jesus way is the way of peace. Oh, the Jesus way is the way of peace. When he is king, all wars will cease. May his peace